India promising to spend more on American goods as the US agrees to trade talks after Donald Trump and Narendra Modi refresh their mega partnership. And looking closer at the talks, we have speaking with us C Raja Mohan, a visiting research professor of the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore. Thanks for joining us, Professor Mohan. Now, it might be eccentric to frame an official visit as a deal-making session, but we're looking at two leaders who pride themselves on being transactional and always putting national interest first. In that context, who won this first round of deal-making?
As the Chinese friends say, it's a win-win. It's not just Trump who's talking about America first policies. Mr. Modi has been talking about India first. So I think there is an interesting, if paradoxical, convergence of interests between America first nationalism in the US and India first nationalism in India. It's also, I think, important to note, just like Mr. Trump has got a penchant for deal making, Mr. Modi is no laggard in this. He's quite flexible. He's quite open to pragmatic deal making. So that's what we saw actually. With all the initial fears that the summit might be a wreck, what we saw was actually Delhi and Washington announce a series of deals that I think that they expect to translate in the next few months.
But I think you have warned of the need or urged people to look beyond just the noise of tussling over tariffs. They can, and I quote you, walk back is as predictable as pushing forward. A lot of these are just aspirational promises. Was there, from your point of view, any real deal, breakthrough between the US and India?
So look, I think there are 4 or 5 areas where major deals have been announced, which are in the interests of both countries. For example, US has the energy, hydrocarbons. India needs them. Therefore, a deal on increasing energy exports from the US is a realistic one. Second, India is a major importer of arms in the world, and President Trump wants to sell more arms to India. So we saw an agreement then they would look towards India buying more weapons from the US. But at the same time, India's demand that US should liberalize the technology transfers in the defense arena is also being accepted. Third, I think in the area of nuclear energy, which is emerging as a major new field, India has promised to reform its domestic laws, and this is India that told its own parliament the Atomic Energy Act and the Liability Act, and the US sees that that's an opening for it to push through some reactor sales. And then on the Asia-Pacific or the Indo-Pacific, if you will, the two sides have agreed to expand the defense cooperation, increase interoperability, strengthen logistics. So many of these actually build on the pre-existing arrangements, while some are new. For example, the deal on Middle East to work through the India-Middle East-Europe corridor. And the trade, of course, trade has been the real big point on which some deal-making has been signaled. As I said, look, for both sides, trade has become a critical issue for Trump, certainly. And I think India has responded by accepting some of the Trump's demand by, reducing tariffs. And both sides have now agreed to set a target of $500 billion by 2030 annual trade. And India and the US will negotiate a trade deal, a fair trade deal, to use the American term now, by September, when Trump is expected in Delhi to attend the Quad meeting. Is this a fresh set of talks? No. During the Trump's first term, Delhi and Washington had tried to negotiate a trade deal that was remained incomplete. But now I think they have a chance to, I think India is under some urgency and Trump wants it delivered. He doesn't have too much patience. So I expect this deal to go through in the next few months as some kind of a trade deal that would create new possibilities. And finally, I would say immigration, many thought was a deal breaker. But what we saw in the last few weeks, one, India has accepted the repatriation of illegal Indian immigrants. And the US now at the summit has agreed to go to the source of the problem. A large number of trafficking rackets between India and the US, which trick people into believing that they're going to get access to the US and then they're caught and they get into deep trouble. So I think both sides have agreed now to crack down on the traffickers
Mohan,
in both the countries.
It's a win-win so far. So where India has been able to make concessions, these align with U.S. interests as well. But the test will be if India needs to give something up that actually costs genuine pain to New Delhi. Which areas might those be? Did we even get there in this meeting?
Look, for example, on trade, I mean, India is offered concessions on reducing trade deficits. The whole idea of, shall we say, a purchase mission to buy more defense equipment, to buy more energy, it's all part of the Indian effort to reduce the trade balance. So, look, I think India is not coming to it from a fixed position. Anybody with a minimum sense of what's happening in Washington will say trade is a big deal for Trump. Now, how do you reduce the differences on trade? How do you do some deals so that, you can say to propitiate Trump? Which is what the Japanese Prime Minister was doing when he went there, which is what many others want to do. So therefore, I think where the natural areas of deal-making, as I said, as energy and defense were easy, but I think it's on the larger areas of giving market access to US, which is where I think India will have to move. And my sense is, given the stakes they have in the relationship with the US, which is a $200 billion trade relationship, it's the most important strategic partner for India. My expectation is that India's calculation now demands moving the relationship forward rather than fighting over minor issues.
All right. So the stakes are not just in trade and the movement that Mr. Trump made on Russia, essentially upturning almost a decade of Washington policy on how to regard the actions of Vladimir Putin, suggests that India might be concerned what might happen in terms of recalibration between Washington and Beijing. So whatever differences they might have on trade, there's enormous convergence, at least on China.
Look, on Russia, Prime Minister Modi welcomed the Ukraine peace initiative because I think reduced tensions between US and Russia is good for India. So for the last 3 years, India has been under pressure on its Russia connection. Now, I think there is a chance that if US-Russia relations improve, India would be quite happy. And that's the reason why Modi, endorsed the Ukraine peace initiative. On China, the story is slightly different. Trump talked about China with Modi standing next to him and his desire to get along with Xi Jinping and improve relations with China. So Delhi would watch very closely how that relationship will pan out. But I think the important thing to remember is Delhi is realistic enough to recognize that Trump is altering the structure of great power relations. And the answer to that, from the Indian perspective at least, is not to complain or whine about US-China relationship, but how does it build on its own relationship with the United States? And second, I think Delhi is also aware that the administration has two different lines. One, which wants to be more hawkish on China. The other, which looks for a deal with China. So India will watch this play out. But if India strengthens its ties with the US in the interim, then the implications of a US-China rapprochement, if you will, can be managed.
That's a visit in which we're seeing India carving out its own place in a fast-evolving global landscape. Thanks so much for joining us, Professor C. Raja Mohan from the National University of Singapore.